I'm a huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid series, and I've been playing the games since the first one came out in 1998. I was just a middle schooler back then, and no video game had ever spoken to me like the first Metal Gear Solid did. It's been a long time though, and I thought it was time to go back and play through some of these games and see if they still hold up almost 2 decades later. This is the first in a series of videos about Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty, the second game in the series and the first Metal Gear game on the PlayStation 2. I'm breaking this into segments both for you and for me. You probably don't want to hear me go on and on about Metal Gear Solid 2 for 3 straight hours, and I don't think I'd ever actually release anything if I wanted to make a single video that long. So without further ado, here is part 1 of Sons of Liberty, the Tanker Mission. It's impossible to talk about Sons of Liberty without talking about the controversy surrounding the game. You surely know this by now, but you don't play as Solid Snake for most of the game. But gamers didn't know that going into it in 2001. All the media leading up to the game was from the initial tanker section, and there were only vague hints that there was going to be any other playable character for the bulk of the game. I was not, and am still not to this day, at all upset with Kojima for this, and I think it's one of the best tricks ever played between a creator and their fans. But after playing the tanker mission again, I can totally see why someone would be upset that this was not the entire game. The sequence is just awesome. If you think back to what the Metal Gear Solid series was in 2001, and then ask someone what they wanted from a sequel, the tanker mission is exactly the sort of thing they'd asked for. You're jumping back into the shoes of Solid Snake, one of the best video game characters of all time, and he's back to doing the things he does better than anyone, hunting down Metal Gears. And you have him doing this in a totally new environment that's a great evolution of Shadow Moses. It's familiar without feeling like it's retreading old ground, and this new world is being realized on the, at the time, super powerful PS2 hardware. Kojima and team were in fine form here and created something that stands the test of time in terms of visual fidelity. I'm playing the HD remaster for PS3, but even the PS2 original looks great today, albeit at 480p. I remember playing at the time and just thinking to myself, yep, this is it. This is as good as games ever need to look. I was obviously wrong, but I can see why a younger me would think that way. This game utilizes a ton of visual tricks to make itself look better than your average PS2 game, and it's so good that you're in awe of it, even when you know the tricks they're employing. They spend polygons wisely on characters, putting much more detail into their faces so that they can exude personality, even if their legs and torsos don't have as much detail. Or how Snake's bandana and accessories bob around as he moves, adding some flavor. All of this gives character to people and makes you overlook what they skimped on. I really love the scene near the end where there are over 20 soldiers on screen at a time. This would not normally be possible, but if you look carefully at them, you can see these soldiers are super low res compared to the normal guards you come across in the game. But you don't really notice this due to some smart lighting and camera angles. Instead, all you're thinking about is, oh my god, I really don't want to alert any of these guys. And then there are the simply cool things they did in terms of visuals that simply were not standard at the time. Enemy bodies would bend naturally as you lied them down in the environment, so their limbs wouldn't clip through walls. This is standard today, but ragdoll physics weren't really a thing in 2001 era console games. Along those same lines, characters' feet actually used individual steps, which is still something you almost never see in games. The game is in 3D, but they stealthily use matte paintings, or flat images designed to give the illusion of depth, to make the game's set feel like it extends far into the background, much farther than it actually does. This is exactly what they are used for in movies, and it works great here too. It's a little thing, but I also liked how characters were able to put on and take off hats without things looking weird. Normally, a video game character putting on a hat would involve them bringing it up to their head, and then the hat would disappear and the character model would swap out with a version of the model wearing a hat. It's kind of weird, and in this game, hats come on and off totally smoothly, and it's a little thing that just looks good, even today. Back to the physics for a second, the world is just fun to interact with. Again, in ways that are not standard fare for the time. You can shoot through glass and the glass will crack and shatter based on exactly where you shot it. You can destroy any of the hundreds of bottles behind the bar, or you can go full Gallagher and explode watermelons littering the food prep areas. You can shoot hanging pans and see them swing and bang against the other pans next to them. You can shoot magazines and see them fly out and fall onto the floor. You can shoot a fire extinguisher, and smoke will naturally reveal lasers guarding a hallway. None of this was strictly necessary, but it helped make the tanker one of the most tangible and memorable video game areas ever made. About the only thing I can say about the visuals that I don't love are Snake's facial expressions. He has a solid range of emotions, which is great, but so often it seems like they mean for him to look super serious, but he really just looks like he smells something rank. Maybe this is a me thing, but I couldn't stop thinking about it when I saw his face. Long story short, people at the time were amazed, and I think the visuals hold up incredibly well today. But let's get back to the game itself. This is the same Solid Snake you learned to love from the past game, but he's now more mobile and has more tricks up his sleeve. The first-person perspective alone changed the game dramatically, as you can now always get a more comfortable feel of your environment. You start the game on a strictly sneaking mission, but things escalate immediately as the ship is taken over by a team of Russian soldiers. The Russians make short work of the guards on deck and are wandering around in the pouring rain, mostly so that you have some early target practice as you get a grip on the controls. You learn how to tranquilize people, how to shimmy and hang off ledges, and that you can stick up guards and point the gun at their heads or groins to get them to give up extra items. You might accidentally shoot one of their walkie-talkies and find out that it makes it so they can't call for backup. Like I said, this game has tons of details, and it makes it feel super real. You eventually make it inside the tanker, and the game shows you a quick cinematic of a guard's shadow. You can't see him, but you can tell he's there due to the real-time lighting. You'll soon probably notice that guards can see your shadow too, and you need to be careful about whether your shadow is in enemy sightlines, not just your body. You also leave wet footprints when you come in from outside, and guards will see those too and find you that way. Again, it's all about the details. This section of the game has a bunch of branching paths, but they all are different ways to get to the same place. You need to get to the bridge of the ship so you can find your first boss fight with Olga. Essentially, Snake is like, who are you and what are you doing here? And Olga hits back with, who are you and what are you doing here? Olga tries to shoot Snake with her knife, and they get into it. This is very much a boss fight meant to teach you how to play the game, rather than to really give you a hard time. Which is good, because it was at that point that I realized how little the controls had clicked with me. See, the game is trying to get you used to using first person, and the fight is basically impossible without using it at all. This is all well and good, but the controls are wacky. You hold down R1 to go into first person and hold square to bring up your gun. Then you have to look around with the left analog stick, not the right one, which is completely counter to what I'm used to. And then release square to shoot. It's weird. Olga continues the trend of the game encouraging you to play with its cool physics, as she will shine a light in your face, which will blind you if you look right into it. You need to shoot this out to be able to effectively fight back. She then shoots a couple of ties to free a tarp and lets it blow in the wind, obstructing her from your view until you finish the job and the tarp flies off into the river. This is also the first fight in a Metal Gear Solid game where you don't have to kill the boss. Olga has 2 bars, one for health and one for stamina. You can shoot her with a standard gun and do physical damage, but you probably won't have one of those at this point in the game, so you have to use your tranquilizer gun to whittle down her stamina meter instead. Once Olga is taken care of, you can take her pistol and head below decks to find the Metal Gear you're actually here to see. There's a cool moment here where the game once again has fun with physics. Snake thinks he sees Vulcan Raiden, the character he killed in the last game, but it's just a shadow of a small toy of the character. Kind of a cool lighting flex. If you shoot the toy, it'll start shooting little tiny pebbles all over the ground that bounce around realistically and eventually litter the ground. It's not necessary, but it's kind of a lot of fun. When you're below decks, you get to run into your first familiar face, Revolver Ocelot. He has a short intro, but you get to see his trademark spurs and namesake gun choice as he makes short work of a lone soldier for no apparent reason other than that he could. Then we finally get to the mission we were here to do in the first place, take pictures of Metal Gear Ray. After you dutifully get pictures from the left, right, and center of Metal Gear, as well as one of the Marines logo on the beast's meaty thigh, you run over to a terminal that Otacon has hacked with his own custom software. This whole sequence is a little weird because it's supposed to be a room full of highly trained soldiers, but you can run at full speed through the room and no one notices you're there. As long as you stay out of their lines of sight, then you can basically run around like a madman. Even when you're in the room with the Colonel, who's speaking and explicitly looking directly in your direction, you can run in circles and he'll never see you. I do love this sequence as they do things to make you think for a moment that the jig is up. They'll pause the speech for a moment as the Colonel has his men do neck stretches so they look left, right at random times, making you run for cover. It really got me one time when the Colonel yelled, "Intruder to the right!" and the whole room drew arms and looked my way. I was safely behind cover at the moment, so I was fine, but I'm freaked out because I think they saw me. A beat goes by, and the Colonel says, "Well done, that was just a test," and the soldiers go back to their normal positions. All right, Kojima, you got me.
Intruder to the left! Intruder to the right! Intruder in the back! Should that actually happen, I expect you to be prepared.
But anyway, you get to the computer terminal and upload the photos to Otacon, who wrote a silly little program with a silly little cartoon version of himself that reviews the photos and confirms you got what you needed. You can have fun and take pictures of random things in the world, and Otacon will comment on them. I didn't do any on this playthrough, but I remember he would give the most animated responses to pictures of people's butts or dirty magazines you found. As far as the gameplay goes, that's it for the tanker. You'll still be here for another 15 minutes, but it's all cinematics from here on out. This video isn't a deep dive into the story details necessarily, so I'll just say that Revolver Ocelot ends up betraying everyone, reveals he's just here to get Ray for himself, and then kills everyone, blows up the ship, and escapes in Metal Gear Ray, which he does so in an incredibly dramatic fashion. Snake appears to maybe get out alive, but his fate is left a little vague as the ship goes down. Obviously, he's not dead, but we're given a reason to think that he might be. Thus ends the tanker mission, and oh boy has it been a ride. The whole sequence only lasts an hour or so, but it's really an iconic hour of gaming. The game welcomes you into this world that's oozing with character. It puts you back in the shoes of your favorite video game hero, and it gives you more things to do with him than ever. It's heavy on cinematics, sure, but these are incredibly well directed and are paced wonderfully. I mentioned in my Metal Gear Solid 5 review that I think Kojima has a special knack for directing video game cinematics, and I'd like to remove the video game part of that statement. He's not just good compared to other video games, he's not without flaw, but he's a true master, and the tanker sequence is him firing on all cylinders. We all know what happens next. A new hero waits in the wings, so I hope you like this video and subscribe so you can see when the next part of the series comes out, and we get to spend a few hours with the true hero of Sons of Liberty, Raiden. Thank you so much for watching.